Namaskar. I am Rajendra Pal, talking from NCERT CIT live program of Swayam Prabha channel. I have with me Dr. D.N. Sansanwal. Dr. Sansanwal is retired from DAVV Indore as Director and Professor of Education. Dr. Sansanwal, welcome to this program.
Thank you.
Viewers, today as you know that Professor Sansanwal earlier also lectured on educational research, and today we will be talking about a very important aspect of educational research, that is known as hypothesis. So Professor Sansanwal, my first question is, what is hypothesis? Can you define it?
Yes. In fact, the hypothesis can be defined that hypothesis is the tentative solution of the problem. This is one definition. The another definition is hypothesis is the intelligent guess about the solution of the problem, and the third definition is hypothesis is the conjectural statement about the relationship between variables. These are the three definitions of the hypothesis.
Then questions arise, what type of hypotheses are there?
Yes. In fact, there is lot of confusion as far as the types and forms are concerned. The one of the type of the hypothesis is called research hypothesis. The another is called statistical hypothesis, and the third one is called operational hypothesis. And each of these hypotheses, they will have a form. You can write it either in the null form, which is denoted by H0, or you can write it in the directional or alternative form, which is denoted by H1. Important point to understand here is that you can decide to write any type of hypothesis, that is the choice of the researcher, but the form of the hypothesis is not within the jurisdiction of the researcher. For that, there are bases. So this is important. Yeah. And one of the base of formulating the hypothesis is very important. It is called review of related literature, and this is there in all the subjects. And another in this one, that when you have no research, say no research has been conducted related to a particular aspect, in that situation it is the null form of the hypothesis which must be stated.
When there is no research, then why we form null hypothesis?
Because you cannot give any direction. In case you give a direction, that will be considered as a biased, and hypothesis cannot be biased. So therefore, for each and every form, you must have the base. You should be able to justify that I have formulated the hypothesis in the null form because of this, or I have formulated hypothesis in the directional form because of this. So one of the situation when there is no research, then naturally it is not possible to give a direction.
In other sense, we can say that literature is not giving any direction to the researcher.
That's right.
So he cannot form a directional hypothesis.
That's right, because there is no basis.
Yeah.
That's correct. The another is that if researches have been conducted, but the number is a few researches have been conducted, on the basis of a few researches, again it is not advisable to give a direction, and therefore one has to form the null hypothesis. So in case a few researches are available, the researcher is advised to form the hypothesis in the null form, because you cannot give a direction. and the argument is the same, because we do not have sufficient or we do not have a strong base to give the direction.
It means both the cases where there is no research and where there are few researches on the basis of which we cannot get any direction.
That's right.
So we have to form a null hypothesis.
That's right.
Okay.
And the third is, if in case large number of researches have been conducted and these researches must be further analyzed, and when the researcher decides to analyze, then there can be three cases. One of the case, suppose if 80% of the research findings indicate that the mean score of reasoning of urban student is significantly higher than those of the rural students. This is case number one. The case number two is, if 15% of the research findings indicate that mean score of reasoning of urban student is significantly lower than those of the rural student. And the third alternative is that if 5% of the research findings indicate that mean score of reasoning of urban student is equal to those of the rural students, taking these three into cognizance, then the researcher in fact has to have a direction. He cannot have, cannot form
Null hypothesis.
hypothesis in the null form. He has to form it in the directional form, and the reason is because majority of the researches, they point towards a particular direction. So therefore, in such a situation, it is the directional hypothesis has to be formulated. On the other hand, in case of a large researches, if 40% of the researches findings indicate that mean score of reasoning of urban student is significantly higher than those of the rural student. The another situation can be that 45% of the research findings indicate that mean score of reasoning of urban student is significantly lower than those of the rural student. And the third is that 15% of the research findings indicate that mean score of reasoning of urban student is equal to those of the rural student. In this particular situation, the researcher can see that there is no clear-cut direction, because in one case it is 40%, another case it is 45%, another case it is 15%. So therefore, the clear-cut direction is not coming, and under such circumstances, it is not advisable to form a directional hypothesis. So it is advisable to form a hypothesis in the null form. So therefore, these are the different conditions under which the researcher can get a direction from the review of a related literature, that whether one has to form the null hypothesis or a directional hypothesis.
Is it possible when someone do a research related review and he find that problem of his solution of his problem is already exist in the literature?
Correct.
Is there any situation
Yes,
arise sometime?
yes, there are situations. I'll give example that large number of the researches have been conducted all over the world, where the intelligence of males have been compared with that of the female, and in majority of the cases it was found that the intelligence of males is significantly higher than that of the female. Now, if such a situation is there, even if a researcher think of conducting a research, then also the finding may comes out to be the same. So under such circumstances, there is no need of conducting a research, and hence there is no need of proceeding further.
Can we say in this situation when person has formulated his chosen his topic, before that he has not conducted sufficient review of literature?
That's right. That's right. That may be the, see, number one is you have to collect the review of related literature. Number two, it has to be analyzed. This is important. And then one has tried to see that whatever the population, whatever the sample characteristics, whether those sample characteristics they cut across across studies, etc., or what are the other variables which might play a role. So therefore they have to take all these into cognizance to decide whether the same research is to be conducted in the same fashion or there is some need to change anything. So that is the review of related literature as one of the source. The another source.
I have one question here.
Yes.
That at what stage one has to start review of literature?
Actually, review of related literature has to be started by the researcher right from the step number one.
Yeah.
The first step of the research is identification of the problem. And in order to identify the problem and in order to select the problem, it is important that the researcher, after having selected the area of the research, he should start collecting the reviews. So this has to be right from step number one. And then he moves it to the step number two. The step number two, which is a formulation of the hypothesis. So that analysis will help him here at step number one. So these two steps are interrelated. Okay. But I want to make one point very clear. There are many research problems where there is no need of having any hypothesis because the nature of the data will be qualitative in nature, which cannot be analyzed with the help of a statistics, and therefore one cannot test a hypothesis, and hence there is no need of formulation of the hypothesis. So there are many areas of the research, say philosophical, say historical, say descriptive survey, say case studies. In these type of researches, it is not advisable to write or formulate the hypothesis. So formulation of the hypothesis only in those researches where the data are of quantitative in nature, or if you have a qualitative data, it should be converted into quantitative, else one should not.
What about the experimental researches we have?
Yes, in experimental researches and in correlational survey researches, since we have the quantitative data which can be analyzed with the help of a statistics, and therefore one can test the hypothesis, and hence one should formulate a hypothesis.
And when someone is formulating hypothesis, what should be the wording of hypothesis?
Before coming to the wording, let me tell one more base of formulating hypothesis, and that is that basis of formulating hypothesis. That one of that base I have already said is the review of related literature, and in that the null hypothesis should be formulated. Another base is theory. There are many researches which have a base theory, and if theory is a base, then hypothesis cannot be in the null form. The hypothesis should be formulated in the directional form, and direction you will get from the theory. So depending upon the theory, the direction is to be given. So if theory is the base, then you cannot formulate hypothesis in the null form. You have to formulate hypothesis in the directional form. There are many theories in psychology, in economics, etc., in sciences there, and therefore you can easily get a direction from those one.
Can you give some example?
Yes, say for example, if suppose that you are giving some reinforcement, and we know if the reinforcement is given, then the occurrence of the desired responses increases. So in such a situation, we are using the theory from the psychology, and therefore we can formulate a hypothesis in the null form. No need of formulating hypothesis in the we can formulate in the directional form, but not in the null form, because there is a clear-cut direction. Now there are wordings. Yes. This is very important, because many a times some of the researchers, when they formulate the hypothesis, the wording is technically incorrect. So therefore one has to take it very seriously, and now I explain it. I take the objective. Suppose the objective is to compare mean scores of stress of male and female college teachers. In this particular case, I can have a hypothesis, because the stress is a variable, and I will have the data related to the stress in the quantitative form, and therefore I can analyze it with the help of statistical technique. So I can formulate the hypothesis. The different types of hypothesis that can be formulated, they are like this. Number one is called a research hypothesis, and its wording is like this: there is no significant relationship between stress and gender of college teachers. In this particular case, it's important to note that the word significant is very important, because there may be a relationship, but it may not be a significant. That means the relationship may not be just because of some reason, but it may be by chance. So when I say there is no significant, so that means this word is very important. That means whatever the relationship exists is not by chance. So therefore this is the important point.
Many people are writing there will be no significant relationship. I have seen in many books also.
Yes. See, the hypothesis has to be worded in the present tense. Yeah. And the reason is because there is a base for formulating the hypothesis. Wherever there is a base, then the future tense cannot be used. It has to be the present tense. So therefore wherever people are using the future tense in formulating a hypothesis, that is technically incorrect. So therefore we should formulate it in the present form, and we must use the word significant. The other type of hypothesis is called a statistical hypothesis, and its wording is like this: there is no significant difference in mean scores. So mean is a statistical word, and therefore it is called a statistical hypothesis. So mean scores of stress of male and female college teachers. The third type of hypothesis is normally not found in many of the books, and it is called operational hypothesis. And this hypothesis can be worded like this: there is no significant difference in mean scores of stress of male and female college teachers when stress is assessed with the help of stress scale developed by XYZ. Now in operational hypothesis and statistical hypothesis, only the difference is, in statistical hypothesis the tool name is not there, so that the researcher has a option in deciding whatever the tool he wants to use or she wants to use. But in case of operational hypothesis, a researcher has already mentioned the name of the tool, and hence this hypothesis cannot be tested when the researcher decides to use some other tool to assess that thing. So here the tool has been fixed. So some of the researchers, if they are not able to decide about the tools which are to be used, then it is not advisable to form an operational hypothesis. Then either the research hypothesis they can form or the statistical hypothesis they can form. Let us take one more example so that it becomes slightly clear to the people. If I take another example as to compare mean scores of hemoglobin of urban and rural females of 25 years of age. For this objective, I word the research hypothesis like this: there is no significant relationship between hemoglobin and residential background of female students of 25 years of age. The statistical hypothesis can be worded like this: there is no significant difference in mean scores of hemoglobin of urban and rural females of 25 years of age. And the operational hypothesis can be worded as: there is no significant difference in mean scores of hemoglobin of urban and rural females of 25 years of age when hemoglobin is tested in XYZ pathology lab. So these are the three types of the hypothesis. Therefore, and in all the three I have used the null form, but depending upon the situation, the researcher can use even the directional form also. Let us take one more, the last example, that there is no significant relationship between stress and work efficiency of IT professionals. If this is my objective, then my hypothesis can be: there is no significant relationship between stress and work experience of IT professionals. For the objective, the statistical hypothesis can be: there is no significant correlation between stress and work efficiency of IT professionals. Now here it is important to point out that in research hypothesis I have used the word relationship, and in statistical hypothesis I have used the word correlation, because relationship is a general word and correlation is a statistical word, and that is why when you use a correlation it becomes a statistical hypothesis. But if the researcher decides to use the word relationship, then this hypothesis will be called a research hypothesis. That is the major difference between statistical hypothesis and the research hypothesis. And in operational hypothesis, now you have understood that only you have to mention the name of the tool that will be used. Now here I can see for this objective the operational hypothesis can be formulated like this: there is no significant correlation between stress and work efficiency of IT professionals when stress is assessed with the help of XYZ tool and work efficiency by LMP tool. So these are the ways the hypothesis in fact should be formulated.
It means when we formulate research hypothesis, we have to use relationship word. When we are using statistical hypothesis,
yes,
we have to use the correlation word.
Some statistical word, whatever it is, whether it is mean, whether it is correlation, whatever is the statistical word, that has to be used.
And in operational hypothesis, we have to inform the name of the tool through
Yes.
which data will be collected.
That's right. The researcher, if can take decision beforehand that this is how he will be collecting the data, and therefore he should mention the name of the tool, and that becomes a operational hypothesis.
Okay. So can you just revise the types of hypothesis and the forms of hypothesis
Yes.
again?
Yes. Actually, there are three types of hypothesis.
Okay.
One type of hypothesis is called research hypothesis.
Okay.
The second type is called a statistical hypothesis, and the third type is called a operational hypothesis. Now, each of these can be formulated either in the null form or in the directional form. But I once again make the people to understand it that it is not the researcher's choice whether to formulate it in the null form or the directional form. For this there has to be a base, and it has to be a strong base.
Can you repeat the basis of the hypothesis?
Yes, the basis of the hypothesis are: number one is the review of related literature,
Okay.
and most of the researchers in different areas, they normally use this as a source for identification of the problem as well as for deciding whether the null form is to be used or a directional form is to be used. The second base is the theory, the underlying theory. Whatever is the theory, so according to that theory, the researcher can formulate the hypothesis, and here it is a directional hypothesis which has to be formulated, because null will not be a appropriate proposition.
It means there are two main things for formulating the hypothesis. One is review of literature and other one is theory.
That's right.
When review of literature is so much important, the earlier people were collecting review of literature through survey of research in education published by MSU and NCERT by Professor M.P. Buch. Nowadays, when information is available through various sources.
Correct.
Earlier, I have seen the students were visiting various places from his place to throughout the India for collecting the review of literature.
Correct.
But nowadays, this scene is changed.
Correct.
Can you enlighten us on these aspects of the collecting of data other than the surveys of research?
Yes, actually because of the IT.
Yeah.
Now, information technology and information and communication technology has come in, and lot of people have started e-journals.
Yeah.
Number one, lot of people were printing the journals. Now all those journals are online.
Okay.
Not only that, even another is Dissertation Abstract International, DAI.
Okay.
Now in India, we do not use the word dissertation for a PhD work, but outside India, people use the dissertation word for a PhD thesis. So therefore, when they say dissertation, that means it is the review of the researches conducted at a doctoral level. So these are also available, and lot of there is a Shodh Ganga also, that where the UGC is trying to upload all the thesis, and therefore now it is very easy for a researcher to search these studies online. And now the NCERT, you also have started doing this work, that whatever the work exists, you are putting it online and people can log it if you can give your address, so that it will be quite useful for the researchers.
I would like to inform the viewers that NCERT has also started survey of research in education, and it is available on website. The site is OSRE, Online Survey of Research in Education.org.in, and anybody can review this literature on our website. And I would like to thanks to Professor Sansanwal, who gave a very thorough information regarding the hypothesis and types of hypothesis, basis of hypothesis, and caution to be taken during the formulating hypothesis, how to word the hypothesis. I think there must be many queries and questions in the mind of the viewers. They can ask these on our toll-free number, as well as they can send the emails to NCERT, and we would like to respond their queries and questions afterwards also. I am again thankful to Professor Sansanwal. Thank you.